Yo, what up, everyone? Welcome to the Portal Room. It's your boy Paul, and of course, co-hosting as always, Christian. Say what's
Hey,
up,
hey,
Christian.
what's up, brother? How are you today?
We're doing good. We got an awesome guest today, host of the Psicoactivo Podcast, a good friend of mine, and yeah, we got Pavel joining us today. Hey,
Hey guys, how you
Pavel.
doing? I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I wasn't able to do it earlier because I had a lot of stuff to do over the last couple of weeks. But I told Paul as soon as I had time, I would tell him, and here we are.
Yeah, man, I love it. I love it. I mean, I was expecting you to be busy, to be honest, for a while, but I love, you made the time, and we're here. So let's get into it, man. What do you think? So let's go over some of the backstory. This is our go-to. So give us the backstory, how you got interested, and how you kind of got involved in the UFO community and covering the UFO topic. So let's start there.
Yeah. So I guess I would say that how I got interested in phenomenology, that would be more accurate because I've been interested in woo stuff and shamanism and precognition stories and all that stuff since I was like 7 or 8 years old. My mother is very um, passionate about books, and she always told us to keep reading. She bought us a bunch of books. I have a massive library here, and it's always been like that. And I did have my very first weird experience when I was very little, like 4 or 5 years old. And this is something that I will never forget because I don't know if it was my imagination. It's possible, but uh, one of those typical nights when your mother goes to tuck you in and you're going to go to sleep, and she turned off the lights. And when I looked up, I saw a bunch of bugs like cockroaches, but like filled the entire ceiling. And they were all just running around. And
Wow.
obviously I basically soiled my pants when I saw that, and I started screaming, and my mom came to the room and she was like, "What's going on?" And she turned on the light and nothing was there, and I was like, "What?" And I was like, "I just saw a bunch of bugs in the ceiling." She was like, "You're imagining things, go to sleep." And when she went back to her room, turned off the light, and they were there, and I screamed again, and she got mad at me. She like scolded me, and I tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't for like 2 hours. It was pretty bad. And since then, hearing and uh, I've been hearing experiences from people since I was little too, because my mom is from a small town near Puerto Vallarta, and there's a lot of lore there about demons, angels, and all that stuff. So I grew up hearing all of those stories my whole life. So uh, the the other anomalous experience was when I was in my early teens, either 12 or 13. I don't remember well. And this was when my mother, she was in it's like a program, you can call it. It's like a kind of like Gestalt stuff like that, like neurolinguistics programming. And she got us into it too. And one of those experiences she had, they called what they called a maracame, which is like a Mexican shaman from the north of Mexico. And they went to do peyote and to like experiment that in the desert. And when they returned, they brought the maracame to our house. And when he was there, he had a bunch of kids around him, and he was like doing, maybe it's a parlor trick, I don't know, but he was I was the first to go. And when I stood in front of him, and he was like, "Close your mouth." And he grabbed me like this, and I didn't open my mouth in the entire time. And he started chanting something, and he started like moving my head around a little bit. And when that was happening, I felt like a piece of my tooth kind of broke out inside of my mouth. And I felt it, and I was like, "What the hell?" And when I felt it, he was like, "Spit it out." And he opened his hand like that. And I was like, "Whoa, what the hell?" And I spotted out, and it was like a little red rock, like this big. And I don't know how that happened, to be honest with you. I have no idea. But since then, I started just going down rabbit holes, reading books, and investigating about these types of phenomena. And along the way, I was watching Jaime Maussan. I was watching all kinds of stuff about UFOs, ancient aliens. So yeah, I grew up with the entire lore, just surrounded by it, you know. But I didn't really get into it seriously because I didn't think it was real for the longest time. But then I saw Commander Fravor on Joe Rogan and his account of the Tic Tac, and I was like, wait, this is real, meaning UFOs. So that's what convinced me about UFOs. But phenomena in general, I'm very used to hearing about it.
Well, it's so interesting that you bring up the David Fravor thing. We've heard that from several different people that have already been on. So, I mean, that's impactful. But I did want to ask you, what have you suspected that was, that little red pebble? Have you ever like gone over what that could have been or what?
So there are different types of mystics and shamans, and from many countries that have studied what basically you could name alchemy, but that's like the generic type of term, you know, because each culture names it differently. Each culture arrives to that place differently. Perhaps the most impactful example that I managed to carve out was Pachita, which is a Mexican shaman who is a woman who, in the 60s, 70s, she performed what she called spiritual surgeries. And she was deemed a hoax for the longest time. There's a comedian that's very famous named Andy Kaufman, who died of a disease, and he went to Pachita and she tried to heal him. But the story goes that she told him that he needed to believe that he was going to be healed. And if he didn't, there was a big possibility that he wouldn't be healed. And he didn't. And he died like days after that. So there's a lot of people that always considered Pachita to be a charlatan. But there's a doctor, Jacobo Greenberg, who I talk about a lot in my channel, who went to visit her and stayed with her for 2 years, studying and trying to understand what she was doing. And the way he met her was really impactful, also because she had contact with the president's sister at the time from Mexico, and people knew her in like the highest circles, Pachita. And this sister of the president wanted for Jacobo to meet Pachita so they could like converse and see if they could advance something in terms of understanding shamanism a little more, you know, because Jacobo wanted to take the scientific approach. And what he saw there in those 2 years is what he says in his book. It's essentially Pachita materialized organs out of thin air. She performed surgeries like transplants of stuff that is today is impossible. But Jacobo claims that he saw that. He saw things that he still didn't understand until the day he disappeared. And that is a similar feeling that I felt when that happened to me with the shaman, that something materialized inside of my mouth, and I don't know how that happened. And since then, I've been wanting to understand how it happened.
Right. Did you ever get, I mean, did you ever get any answers for that? Like what that red gem might have represented or anything like that?
Well, at that time, that shaman said that it was just bad juju that I had inside of me, and he took it away from me. But I don't know if that is just a representation of this ability that some shamans have, you know, that has nothing to do with me, maybe, or if it does have something to do with me. I don't know. What I do know is that there are other examples of other mystical people that have done this in the past, and the perhaps the person that I think approached the most to a proper scientific explanation or something is Jacobo himself, because he studied as a neuroscientist for his entire career, and he tried to understand how the brain works when shamans are doing their seances or their rituals and stuff like that. And he did like write everything down. He founded the Mexican Institute of Consciousness after meeting Pachita, because he believed that these shamans were like essentially a next step in human evolution, that um were capable of doing things that just regular folk would consider magic, but there's like a scientific explanation to it. And he said that there is a neuronal field that is always there, and our brains interact with that and with the lattice of information. And when these two like connect, that's when reality is created. But reality is not created without us being involved in the process, which is pretty wild, because
It's
now that we
crazy.
see UFOs and knowing that, it's like, and how seemingly connected to us they are, it just makes you wonder, what if we are creating them? you
What
know
about this, Pavel? What about this? I've said the same exact thing about the implants as well. Like this
yeah,
whole
that's
conscious
another example.
abduction. You know what I mean? Like if it is this astral abduction and you're inducing all this fear, right? There's like a level, right, like what you're saying, it's kind of like the alchemy of it all, right? Like intertwined with the consciousness. And then, because of the elements in your body, you could quite literally be manifesting something inside of yourself, right? Like
Yep.
it's crazy to think
Yeah.
about, but that's, I always say nature is technology. So, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. And I think the way it kind of works, because I've those like programs that my mom put us through when we were younger, they deal a lot with that. They have like this tool they call the Observer. And this tool is something that you use to visualize something that you want, or something that you want to happen. And you can like name it whatever you want. You can use it. For example, there were some people that had imagine they had like a little Jiminy Cricket or something like that, or a little panda. The way I saw my Observer was that it was like a camera with a recording in the corner, and that's what I saw all the time, that I imagined. And I used that since I was young, before I was 10 years old. And it's really weird, because I don't think it's like magic when you understand the whole process that goes with it, that you imagine something, but after you imagine it, you also have to physically do stuff that can take you there eventually. And you do it unconsciously, because you already have that desire and that like visualization in your mind. But you also make decisions that are, in many cases, unconsciously, that can lead you towards that end goal. For example, my brother, for example, since he was little, and he also used this tool all the time, he said from the beginning that he wanted to someday study in Japan. And he said it when he was like 6 years old or something like that. He did went to study in Japan, but he had to take Japanese classes. He had to watch anime like a madman, and all of that process eventually takes you to that end goal that you want. It's not like you just do this and it appears magically. No, it's a whole process to create reality.
I think we embed like our subconscious is, I really think that that's what it is. Like, even when you said, right, when there's no intention behind it, sometimes I feel like memories get stored in the back of your mind, and those subconscious like thoughts or whatever, like they somehow reemerge. And that could even happen with the phenomena. I mean,
Yep.
maybe that's what's happening with the phenomena, I should say,
Yep.
right? I mean, I don't know. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and it's a weird synergy that we have with the entire like well, John Keel called it the super spectrum, and it's that it's the way we interact with it, and how and what it gives us in return, based on
Yeah.
how we interact with it.
The unconscious mind somehow is like coming together with that same synergy that you're talking about, I think it's pretty wild. Go ahead, Christian. You're going to say something. My bad.
No, yeah, I was just going to agree. I think that those are all like excellent points, about all of this, like the way that the phenomena interacts with people, and how like that consciousness field kind of reflects back. It's kind of like we're co-creators with whatever this super intelligence might be. You know what I mean? And once we finally start to like understand that in a peaceful way, I think is when we might, start to have a little bit more interaction, I suppose, or understanding of how that works in a lot of ways. But I wanted to ask you, Pavel, maybe changing gears a little bit, kind of back to where you got, like you got back into the topic because of Fravor, or you got into the topic really because of Fravor. You ended up with, sorry, the Christian Harloff show, doing a lot of work with Christian. And I'm wondering how that came about and, kind of the series of events, if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that.
Yeah, of course. And it has to do with what we're talking about, coincidentally, because I've been watching Christian and his co-creator of the Schmo Show, Mark Ellis, who's a comedian from Los Angeles. And I've been a fan of those two guys for the longest time, since I was in college. And I developed like a fan kind of interaction with them throughout the years. There's also another part of them whose name is John Schnapp, who unfortunately passed away like in 2019 or 2018, something like that. And I got really like, I felt like they were like my buddies, but I didn't really know them. But like 5 years ago, and this is really weird because it just like a full circle kind of moment. I wrote something to Mark Ellis along the lines of, it would be really nice if we could work together someday. Because I'm a journalist and I've always been very passionate about film as well. And despite me doing my entire career in sports journalism, I was always up to date and up to speed and everything about film. And when I told that to Mark, it was like right after 2020 or something like that, right after the pandemic started. And I don't know, I don't remember what he wrote back to me. I have it back there, but like at the start of 2024, end of 2023, I didn't remember that message that I wrote to Mark, but I saw Christian that he was doing this UAP Tuesday show. And I was already starting to think about where I wanted to go with Psicoactivo, because it started in Spanish and we started touching on different subjects, but we didn't really go deep into the whole phenomenology aspect of it. We wanted to talk about more like psychedelic substances and all that stuff. And when I saw Christian doing the UAP Tuesday show, I was like, if I send him an email, maybe trying to collaborate, show him what I've done so far. By that time, I had already interviewed Jaime Maussan. I had already, James Fox had already shared some stuff that I did on Joe Rogan, which was pretty wild to see. Just written stuff. And I was like, I'm just gonna, and he responded and I was like, whoa. And we had a call, we had like StreamYard, and he was like, when can you start? Let's do it. And yeah, the first show ever that I did on he's actually his big channel. It's the most viewed video ever on his channel. And that's when it all started. I started editing some videos for him, and that's how it started. And then I saw that message that I wrote to Mark like 5 months in, and I was like, what the hell? And I showed Mark, he was like, that's crazy.
Crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah,
that is crazy. That's awesome, dude. I honestly, I was gonna say, I like some of the other videos too that he does, where like he reviews some of like the Marvel movies and stuff.
Yeah, dude.
So
that's his thing. That's
really
like
good.
Yeah. Yeah, he's one of the best. He's like a grumpy uncle. That's like his stand-up comedy show is very much like that. If you see his stand-up, it's like always complaining about stuff, but it's really funny. He's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And it's really, I think it's incredible because I think I stumbled across you off of Christian's channel when all these things were starting to happen. You know what I mean? And then I, ended up on UFO X, and I was like, oh my God, that's Pavel. He's in spaces. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I was like, this is great, and it was funny because you'd kind of pop into conversations here and there, and I was like, man, we got to get Pavel up, like he's doing great work. You know what I mean, with Christian, and I mean, it's just incredible to see how all these things have unfolded. And now you're right. I feel like you're the tip of the spear in a lot of ways, and I don't think like a lot of people know that Pavel here, his YouTube channel, he's at the tip of the spear. He's got the information that you want as far as disclosure is concerned. He's an honest man. And that's very hard to come by, I feel like, in the disclosure movement and the whole process. And Pavel's your man for that. So it's been incredible to see that unfold. Do you feel like personally the phenomena has played a role in that for you?
Well, one part. Thank you for saying that. First of all, I do try. So I still make a lot of mistakes, man, because and when you grow up in a breaking news environment, which is the bulk of my career, it becomes sometimes a little difficult to um, get a story completely right as it's happening. Um, but I like to think that I've made a few mistakes, not many. But you know, it's that one's kind of hard because I've been going in a different direction since December 2014 in my life in general. Because before that, I was on a decade long psychedelic experience, but like filled with excess and putting my life in dangerous situations constantly. And then after that date on December 2014, something changed that took me through a different direction. And I do think that some kind of phenomenon was involved in that because I had a near death experience. And when I had that, and I spoke to Nick Cook about this on the channel when we spoke, because I've been reading some of the stuff he does besides his brilliant book, The Hunt for Zero Point. And he started looking into life after death after his wife's mother passed away, and they had what they called a shared death experience. And when I saw that, he also mentioned something about a fear death experience, not a near death experience. And that's what I went through. I never lost consciousness. It was all while I was still awake, and I had an OD, and my mother was there to save my life. And if she hadn't been there, I would have been gone. And when that was happening, I felt at the very peak of the moment when I thought that I was gone, I spoke to something, you know, and I asked to be given a second chance, and I'm here. But since then, my wires, uh, my brain rewired in a certain way that I stopped doing substances. I even stopped drinking for about a year. I drink occasionally again, but I've never had a problem with that really. Um, what I feel the happiest about is I stopped smoking cigarettes. I used to smoke a lot, and that was really really cool. And I didn't go through like withdrawals or anything. I was just decided to not do that anymore. And I think that had something to do with it, that near or fear death experience that I had. And that's how I lived it. People can either believe it or not. It doesn't really bother me if people don't believe an experience that I've had. I think that I like to think that I have a little bit of thicker skin for when I get those types of reactions, because I just go like, yeah, but you don't understand what I went through. If you had gone through like that or something similar to that, maybe you would, and that's okay. I mean, just trying to be a little more empathetic towards people who don't know or haven't been through that.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Glad you're
That's
okay,
wild.
man.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
me too. I'm glad that you got out of that. I mean, I personally have seen a lot of people struggle through addiction in my immediate family, so I get that. But I did want to ask you, whenever you were having that near-death experience, was it like you said you heard a voice? Do you feel like that was your own, or was there any distinction between the voice or
I
anything like
spoke
that?
to something and I felt like that something was listening to my words. I don't know how else to explain it, to be honest with you. I didn't hear anything speaking back to me, but I felt like something was hearing me. And right after that, I went to sleep for the first time in like 3 days, and my mom was looking after me. And when I woke up the next day, she was kind of angry, and she was like, because I didn't let her sleep either, because she was taking care of me. And when I woke up, she was like, "You motherfucker, you were laughing in your sleep." And I was like,
Wow,
"Sorry."
you're on a full-blown trip, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. But I did want to say to Christian's point earlier as well, he was saying, you being on top of this subject and you kind of discussing even with this experience, right? Your level of discernment. I think that's the thing that I think a lot of people respect about even your channel is I feel like you're trying to be kind of even keeled for the most part, right? I wouldn't you say like
I
you're not
tried to, yeah.
you're not trying to put out like a specific narrative. You're just because I've seen you'll cover something and then you'll say, well, it could be this, right? Instead of saying, well, it is this exactly. I mean, I
That's
feel like that's most of your perspective. And I think that's an important one to have because before the stream started, right, we were talking about narratives and whatnot. Maybe you can kind of get into some of that.
yeah. I can give you like because in college I did my thesis in radio and media analysis, and from that media analysis perspective, I started analyzing everything that was going on in the UFO community about a year before I decided to go public and to start doing stuff in English. Because when I realized that there was a whole community in English about this, and it's like one of the richest communities because most of the things that have happened about UFOs, like the most remembered things, Roswell and stuff like that, have happened in the US. Perhaps the UK is also very, very famous for Rendlesham and all that stuff, you know. But yeah, when I started, um, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Um, what was I telling you?
Well, I had mentioned narratives and you were kind of going into sort of like the US has like the most in terms of like the English speaking side of it. You were talking about how
Oh
you
yeah.
got more involved on the
When
English
I
side.
when I started like trying to analyze this, I realized that in Mexico, my country, it was more difficult to get like a proper footing if you wanted to do this kind of work because it's very monopolized in my country. But when I saw how much people were doing stuff about these topics and that I wanted to do them, it was a no brainer for me to start doing it in English. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I think it was the go-to for you inevitably. But okay, so you talked about Mexico though. As you know, I'm Hispanic too. So um, I feel like there's a little more openness with the paranormal and
Yeah.
UFOs and whatnot. And I know that, yeah, you're kind of right with the US and the UK being a big proponent of, covering this topic. But I would say even places like South America, right? Like Brazil and whatnot, there's so much stuff down there, right?
Yeah, in Brazil
And
we have Colares and Varginha, for example.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly. I think, but to your point, I think it's just right. The range of where the eyeballs is at is mainly in the US, which kind of in a way, I don't know if you maybe feel the same way. It's a little disappointing because I
It
feel like
is.
maybe that puts a little bit of a like an anchor on the process. Like if disclosure is real, it should be a global effort.
Yeah.
And it's strange because again, we were talking before the stream here about, well, this is like so weird, like these narratives, right? And how we're seeing certain groups in this UFO disclosure movement support each other, but when you look at like their separate narratives, like for instance, we were talking about how essentially people like Jake Barber and Camp support Lou, right? But at the same time, they don't share the same national security negative angle. They're more like the Greer side, like the love and light, kind of bringing in that approach. But again, right, like there's still like a surface level of support, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Actually, where that was born was essentially with Jim Semivan, because he has like a general level clearance, but in the CIA as a CIA officer. And the experience he had with the phenomenon was very negative. So, given his clearance and his level of access back in 2017, he's the one who like prompted for this threat narrative to take a hold of the whole
Good
community,
point.
you know? And that's what started that narrative. But yeah, I also see that everybody at the top, like the Lus, the Court Bells, the Naps, everybody has seems to have like their own agenda or their own process of disclosure. And at times it seems to me like they're like kind of racing to be the first one to
Yeah.
go like, yes, aliens are real. And you know, it kind of feels that way, although they don't say it. And although like on paper they support each other and they say nice things about each other and they do photos with each other and all this stuff. And but we can see what's happening. We can read between the lines. I mean, at least people with a little bit of discernment can, you know. And it's another aspect that I think we need to touch on is that a lot of these different narratives that are taking place right now, there's so many. We got to understand that psyops were essentially created like in the 30s or late 30s, early 40s. So you would think that the ones who like basically invented the term would be amazing experts at doing them right now after like nearly 100 years of repetition. And there's been some disasters throughout history in terms of psyops, but there have been some that if you don't know about it, it's a successful one. That's the bottom line, I guess. And we don't even realize that it's a psyop, you know.
Yeah, it's gotten. I feel like the whole field has gotten like the information zone's been flooded with narratives.
Yeah.
And I think that's the common denominator that a lot of people seem to be missing because they want, like everybody wants an answer, to what's happening. But the zone's been flooded. And I think a lot of us, like, especially like experiencers, you know, are like, we understand kind of that what's happening. It's like, okay, it's just wading through all of it is difficult. And that's why like people like yourself are very important to have in the community. You know what I mean? People who actually do a lot of the research on these individuals because like say for example, I go to watch your videos when I have a question about something. You know what I mean? Like you're a resource for me, truly. And I don't say that about almost any other podcaster.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
true. He's not
at all.
into like the political side at all.
Exactly. So, kudos for that. Do you
Thank
think, yeah, no, absolutely. Do you think that we're getting like any form of disclosure at all in this moment in time? Like Pavel, from what you've seen, from the people that you've interviewed, do you feel like we're actually getting any sort of official narrative that might come close to the truth?
I guess the safest way to look into this and actually try and find out the truth is what do you have in terms of facts, stuff that actually happened to people, you know. And it's very basic to me. It's people have been reporting abductions since like the 60s or 70s. That's one. People have been reporting sightings for millennia. That's two. Um, People have been talking about near death experiences for the longest time. And that is also a phenomenon, you know? Um, and I guess all the other narratives that are taking place, this stuff about the Galactic Federation, all this stuff, I think that's what is used to like uh, muddle the waters, so to speak. You know, it's and I don't know what is and what isn't real, but I would go to the basis, to the basics, and start there. And that's, I mean, the grays are something that have been reported since the 60s or 70s alongside the abduction phenomenon. That also seems to be something that is happening to people. And you have to go to that. What is actually happening, not what people are saying. And that's the like the what I use to measure this kind of stuff, you know. All the rest,
I,
I will listen to it gladly. I will read the Lacerda files. I would, you know, stuff like that. But to me, they're just stories that are fun. But we gotta like stay grounded there and what you have actual proof for and what you don't. You know?
I think a lot of the issue is the Hollywood indoctrination with the propaganda over time, like this whole sci-fi narrative that got incorporated into like this I'm a star seed type of mindset, right?
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with like just like esoterics and stuff like that. It's kind of old, but they wrapped it into sci-fi. I really think is what it is, in my opinion, and it makes it hard even for people like me. I was talking about this on our open mic the other night about how it's disappointing how the expectation is the president at a podium, right, saying we're not alone. And in a way, I feel that expectation like in the back of my mind, but I know that that's not manageable. Like that doesn't give you disclosure at the end of the day. And I think again, it has a lot to do with the Hollywood propaganda.
To me, also, there's an important aspect that the military industrial complex is trying to like go mainstream with this too, and you can see it happening in front of your eyes, like the tech bros that are like starting to hop into this. You can tell that they want it, they found out something is going on and they're going after it. You can tell it's pretty evident, and
Yep.
that is also happening. So whatever that is, um I don't really feel comfortable with the secret keepers just passing it along to elites. That's fucked up if you ask me. I'm sorry.
It is. Honestly, it is. And it's kind of funny. You like when you say elites too, it's also just people that have access to information.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure you've had these little backroom conversations. Like, yeah, I heard this. It's like why did I think it's just human nature. Like even David Grush talked about this in his Rogan interview. It's like people get off on having information that they can keep from people. I think it's probably always been that way, like resources, right?
Yeah.
Just like resources. And the UFO topic incorporates that.
And you
too.
can tell when someone is enjoying that just by the tone of their voice or how they write or the smugness. You can tell. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, what do you think? Like, where do you feel like some of these whistleblowers kind of give off some of that impression? I mean, we don't have to say anybody specific, but I get that impression sometimes. I mean, I don't want to call out somebody who's trying to do like a civil service or something like that, whatever you want to call it, with disclosure, but I get a little turned off with like this, like I don't want to say gatekeeping because I know that people have NDAs and they can't speak about everything, right? But it's just there's little things I feel like, come on, like you're playing
Yep.
with the information you have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's I guess they do it because if they were to give everything up, they would lose that sense of power that they gained from getting that information. And I guess that's what is driving people that do that. That I can't find any other sensible explanation besides those who sign NDAs and all that, because there actually is like uh, threats going on to people that are involved in this, and there is harassment, and that's happening. It's not our imagination, but sometimes it is blown out of proportion by others, that also claim that they're being threatened now, and it's not true, But yeah, it's like main character syndrome of sorts.
Dude, I
Yeah.
love that you said that. We were mentioning that the other night, right? I think that's the issue with any side of the coin when it comes to this topic, whether you're a researcher, an experiencer, whatever, right? I think everybody's trying to be the main character in this. And you said it earlier, right? Like everybody's trying to race to scream aliens are real first. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's totally main character.
And it's the first thing that comes to mind when something like that, I see something like that, it's way too often. It's like, it's not about you, dude. It's not about you. It's about the information. That's it. And sharing it. That's the key, I think. You
Yes,
have
sir.
it, you got to share it. If you don't put anyone in danger, and you're not in danger of like going to jail or something, you got to share that shit.
Totally agree. Totally agree with that. Yeah, and you're right, Pavel. You know what I mean? And I've talked about this before. That's kind of how disclosure works, is the sharing of information as well as experiences, because it like unlocks a bigger picture of what's actually happening. You know what I mean here for us. So it's all intention, right? Somebody gets a piece of information, how they utilize it. You know what I mean? Is the human condition. I feel like, right? We're always fighting against that for the ego and everything else that falls under that umbrella. But I want to take it a little bit further now. I want to ask you about the Nazca mummies. Let's get into the mummies a little bit. I want to
Oh
talk
snap!
about.
Let's go.
Let's get some mummies. Let's hear
Yeah.
about it.
Okay. Oh, so what do you want to know specifically? Because there's a bunch of that I can get into. What do you want to know specifically?
Well, let's talk about where we're at now versus where it was when they first were presented. Like, how far have we come as far as getting some sort of acknowledgement that these beings, in an official capacity, are non-human terrestrial entities?
The key year, I think, for that was when Jaime presented the mummies at the Mexican Congress. That's when it blew up, really. But that doesn't mean that that event was. I still have some reservations about those little bodies. There's a lot of debate about them. There's people who think they're like completely real and they were once living beings. I happen to think that they're ancient reconstructions that were put there to, in some way, um, like as a ritual for the larger bodies, which are real in my estimation. And I think that back in back in September, uh, after years of trying to get the Ministry of Culture of Peru to acknowledge the bodies, and they've been obfuscating the case since 2017. They've been planting false information. They've been even made dolls that are modern that were like used to say these are fake. Look, but in September, after a long lawsuit that was taking place between Jaime and the Ministry of Culture, Jaime Maussan, that is, the Ministry of Culture finally decided to take two of those bodies, which were at Ica University, and take them to an MRI and X-ray hospital and run all the tests on them officially from the Ministry of Culture. And the doctors that made the test, they determined that one of those was actually human, and the other one had the tridactyl features naturally. So it was another type of being. And this was finally semi-officially acknowledged by the Ministry of Culture about 2 weeks ago, when they made the entire information public to everyone. And now we're just waiting for an official confirmation that these are real. But given that the Ministry of Culture already shared the information, I already consider that they acknowledge them as real. And those are just the larger types, because the others I don't know about it. I don't think they are.
Aren't there like these insect looking ones as well? There's like one
Yeah.
with wings and whatnot. I saw there in the comments, we'll toss it back for our homie, Free Wakata, Free King
Yeah.
Wakata, big mummy supporter. He would have been proud to hear that the Ministry of Culture announced that. I think that was one of the main things that a lot of people that were interested in the mummies were actually waiting for. So, I mean, that's good enough confirmation for me. I mean, what they are they hybrids? I mean, I don't know.
That's I don't dare go in that far, to be honest with you. I do have a doctor that is from Argentina who I've spoken to about 3 times on the channel, and he has a really interesting theory that I think is by far one of the most interesting, because he arrived at his conclusions through his specialty, which is anthropomorphic anthropology, morphological anthropology, which is kind of the same thing that Dr. Michael Masters does, just to give you an example. But this guy actually created the specialty in Argentina back in the day. He's like in his 80s now. And he went to the Mexican Congress and testified about these bodies because he had them in person and he analyzed them and he measured their craniums. And what came out of those measurements is that the angles they have are those of a being that is like millions of years in the future compared to us. And when he said it in the Mexican Congress, he was like, these beings are us from the future. That's what he said. And I was like, what?
So creepy.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And it was really weird because what I did was I had contact with Ross Coulthard at the time. So I decided to ask him. And he kind of snapped back at me. He was like, that's really irresponsible. Why would you say this in public? And I was like, I'm not saying it. The doctor is saying it. and I don't know. Ross is weird. We can talk about him later. But yeah, I got really interested in Piotti. His name is Celestino Piotti. And we struck up a friendship, and he's still on the same boat. He thinks that the angle measurements of the cranium are from beings that are 3 million years in the future, more evolved than us.
That's wild. What now? Do you have like? I mean, did he like lay out the criteria for what exactly like made them think that was the case, or?
Yeah,
like,
he's done it. Basically, he's been measuring craniums, which is his specialty. Like craniometry is his thing, and he's been measuring craniums for decades. Like hundreds of thousands of remains he's looked at, and he's looked at pretty much every evolution stage that we've had up to Homo sapiens. So he knows based on the measurements when he's looking at an Australopithecus, when he's looking at a Homo habilis, and every single one that is known, he's looked into. So when he did the measurements, he knows what the range is between each species. And when he made the measurements with those, he realized that they were way too inclined to the future, like those angles. And he did it again. He didn't believe what he was doing, what he was looking at. He repeatedly did them. He got so nervous that when he went to testify in Congress after thousands of times measuring the same angles, he still did the measurements just before going on stage, because he was like, what I'm about to say is something that I don't think nobody's going to believe me, but this is what the data is pointing at, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, that's so wild. Like, it just gives more credence, I feel like, to the thought of like, the phenomena coming back from the future, and like possibly, whatever circumstances might have occurred in those moments for them to get stuck or trapped or whatever. But that's mind blowing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wrapping your head around that.
Another aspect that I think maybe could be possible with that is that before the cataclysms happened, I don't know if it's possible, but I don't know how diverse hominids were back then before that, So if life is cyclical and there are cataclysms every thousands of years, uh, we don't know if there was like a more evolved hominid species living alongside us. And they somehow maybe got the knowledge that the cataclysms would happen, and many of them even could have gone underground and flourished there. And it's another just another possibility besides what Piotr says, which is also a possibility. I'm not discounting it, but yeah.
Oh, I like that theory. And to me, outside of like whenever you said they have the anatomy like of what we'd be like in the future, that's totally like the Michael Masters, future humans hypothesis. And then also it ties into some of the crypto type of phenomena as well, when you were saying, well, maybe they hid underground, right? And I love how you brought that into like the younger Dryas impact. I think that there's just a lot of rediscovery is what's happening. Like our technology is catching up. I think this stuff has always been here. Hell, I mean, maybe it wasn't another species. Maybe it's like what Christian said. Maybe they came and they crashed, and maybe what they did back then, right? And they made little dolls is like they just put them in a cave or something. Like, let's leave this here for someone to find later. Like that was their hangar back then. You know what I mean?
You know what's really weird about that though? That the place where they were found, the carbon dating is so different from one artifact to one body to another that, for example, the larger bodies, they're between 1700 and 2000 years ago. But the little ones are like 800. So somebody put the larger bodies 2000 years ago there, and then somebody put the other ones there. And then there are like 3 or 4 giant hands that are also tridactyl that are like 2 feet in length.
Yeah.
And they ran carbon dating on those, and those are like 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
So what the hell? It's who's putting that there
wild.
in different
it's
eras.
Storage. Dude, it's storage.
So wild.
I'm telling you. It's their own UFO hangar from back then, It's like that's where they used to keep the bodies. Think about the place though too. I mean, the Nazca Lines and all that. I mean, again, we talked about phenomena being down there in South America for a long time, and you mentioned colares and so forth. So I don't know. I've heard this theory about colares. I don't know if you have that. That was supposedly maybe like a psyop too by the U.S. government, because they wanted to spin the whole negative NHI,
Yeah. And there's a change of tune that I saw from Jacques Vallée, because if you watch the old Jeffrey Mishla videos where he's being interviewed, he talks about this, what you're just talking about, that a lot of this is like psyop or like man-made just to scare people. And then now if you ask him about this stuff, he won't tell you that. He like kind of changed. But I guess if you go through the Forbidden Science books, you realize that that's like the whole history of ufology from his perspective. And you can see when something happened that made him do a 180, which is pretty interesting if you ask me.
I don't know. I've speculated on that though too. I mean, even before this kind of hypothesis had been coming out, I've thought about a lot of the reason why they raise concern over like national security issues. I mean, I still think that that's important. I still think that that's real, but it's to your point about it being our technology. And I mean, if we've been doing this for God knows, more than 80 years, I mean, I would probably suspect that they're doing some type of my labs type of scenarios and whatnot. And maybe like it's not even posed to be this like alien type of stagecraft that they're trying to do. I think maybe some of it has to do with like drugs. Like maybe they're drugging people and then they're kind of like maybe hallucinating or something. I don't know. I toss around too many ideas in my head, Pavel. This is what's
Yeah,
so complicated about this topic. You know what I mean?
yeah. And
Just
then there's the
so much.
whole MK Ultra stuff, that it's also
Exactly.
tied to that. That could be happening too.
Mm.
Yeah, we can't discount anything. And this is something that is really funny though to me, that there's people that go, no, this is happening. No, this happened. No, what you're saying is not true. And it's like, dude, nobody knows what the hell's happening.
Yeah.
Why would you be so certain? It's a disservice to yourself if you do that, investigating this stuff, because it's really hard to know, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, like touching on that, Pavel, where would you say, like right now, like in all of this whole like topic, where there's some smoke, right? Like where they say there's some smoke, you'll find some fire. Where do you think there's some smoke right now to look for
Well,
individuals who are trying to get some new
for
information?
me, perhaps the biggest smoke that I see is what the only thing that I have ever really experienced that is like anomalous, um, which is I was doing a psychedelic trip with two friends in 2006, and we were so in tune with each other that there was a certain moment when we were speaking, but our mouths were not moving, and we were listening to each other's voices. And when that happened, we started crying because we couldn't believe it was happening, and we started just continued doing it for hours, and we didn't want to go to sleep because we kind of knew that it was gone if we went to sleep, and it did go. Um, so for me, the biggest smoke perhaps is that something that I know. I don't know what to call it. People call it telepathy, but I don't know if that is what happened. I'm just describing like very exactly what happened, and that's the only smoke that I really see. And after, because something that people like to shit on a lot, especially skeptics, is what Kai Dickens and Dr. Powell have been doing with the telepathy tapes. And I've told this a couple of times already. When this podcast came out, my parents are doctors, so they know a lot of doctors in my town, and I know a couple of doctors that have non-verbal autistic children. And when I showed them the tapes, they came to my house and we spoke for hours. And I realized that they also are experiencing this phenomenon. And
Wow.
it's really wild, like just to have it here, like, and they were like, I couldn't talk about this because if I did, I would be disbanded by the medical association. And yeah, that is true. That's what happened also to Dr. Powell for a while. They took her license, and she was reinstated because they realized that the research is legit and there is phenomena happening. That's where I think the most smoke is right now. As far as with the UFO topic, I would keep just talking to experiencers and getting their perspective, not trying to um, disparage anyone from either the intelligence community or these talking heads. But I think that the bulk of the actual information that is real comes from experiencers, doesn't come from the government.
Yeah, I agree with that. So you're saying, right, like personal experience has a lot more credence, right? And I think that is true in a lot of ways. I think disclosure comes from what you resonate with or what has happened to you, really.
Yeah.
I wanted to say whenever you mention nobody knows what this is, I think that's the top down level as well with like the people in these programs. If there were any agreements ever, then that has to be some really dark shit, to be honest. But I don't know how much of that is true, if I'm being totally honest. I think the fact that well, let's maybe just bookmark this, but let's just talk about maybe the fact that a lot of these um factions are like Christian fundamentalists, and they're into a lot of, that belief system. So if that's the case, I would just say be careful on what they define as the phenomena. A lot of people are starting to merge the idea that it's all angels and demons. And I think that's why they don't want a lot of this information to come out. I think this is like a universal good and bad that we were talking about the other night, me and Christian. It's like the universal good and bad can use the same archetype for millions of people and then just reshift, like maybe totally reshift its appearance anytime
Yeah.
it wants. And maybe that's what it is. It's just there's themes, right? There's these egregores, just whatever you want to call it, right? Like it materializes a specific way for certain people. And I think that it's always just going to be that way. Like it's just always going to be that way. I don't know how much they know, and I don't think it's a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, same, absolutely. And I also think that's why I mentioned Jim Semivan, but also you got to mention people like, for example, Chris Bledsoe, who,
Yeah.
even though he's like experienced some really horrible stuff, he has a different outlook of life, and you can tell. And that's how this phenomenon, whatever it is, presents itself to him. You can talk about semantics and how he interprets it, which is something entirely different, and I respect that. But when you look at the way he conducts himself, um, and you look at the other example of Semivan, you can tell that the phenomenon presents itself differently depending on your own experience or your own outlook in life.
Yeah, totally. And I think it was very pivotal that you mentioned that him kind of being the proponent of this narrative. I never really thought of it that way, to be honest, but it is a good point. But again, this is what we were talking about earlier, Pavel, about like this surface level support, right? And then out of like the idea that everybody agrees that aliens or UFOs are real, they all have their own belief system, right? And then they kind of sidebar. And I think that that's okay in a lot of ways, to be honest. Everybody needs their own camp. But when it comes to like this government disclosure, I think that's where it's really, really lacking. And we talked about this on the last stream too, again, about this planned disclosure. So I know you covered it in your video the other day about Luna setting up for the end of this month with the skift and the round table, and then the actual hearing around May 12th. I think that stuff like that, it rubs me the wrong way. Like maybe that's like not the best take to have, but it kind of rubs me the wrong way because like it's like whenever David Grush said, like, I know where everything is at. Like I have all the addresses. And to me, I actually like my heart sank when he said that, because I was like, oh great. Now they're all gonna hide the stuff again. Like, you know what I mean? Like I hate to be so pessimistic or skeptical, but it's just that's the type of line of thinking that this I don't know, like this whole topic has pushed me into. It's like I'm really trying to find a fine line of having hope for this public disclosure, because I do think it is important for, the general normie to know that this stuff exists, right? For it to not be polarized by the stigma.
Kind of funny though. I think the people that have been at this for the shortest amount of time are usually the ones that lose hope the fastest. Because I see it in my comment section. The people that get like the most hopeful messages relate to me are like 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, even 80-year-olds. And they're like, dude, before 2017, forget about all of this information that is
True.
coming out. And you know, you gotta like respect the elders in that way, because but yeah, I also share like that disdain for politicians, you know. And I've spoken to Matt Laszlo for many times already, and he and I are like on the same page there. It's like, dude, every politician is kind of the same thing. They just play like a like a theater play, and because they have to represent a camp, but essentially they're the same thing. They just want more constituents that can get them reelected. And it's really rare to see a politician that is actually fighting for the people and doesn't get corrupted along the way. Almost everybody does. And those who don't, you know, it's happened. It's even happened in my country a couple of times before, you know. And it's just like trying to rage against the machine when you're part of the machine will get you disappeared very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost as if like the politicians and the government themselves is the NHI. You know what I mean? They all work in lockstep for a big
Yeah.
play. You know, you're George Carlin said it best, right? It's all one club and you're not in it. And
Yeah.
if you're not in it and you do your own thing, they get rid of you, unfortunately. So I think it'll bring me to my next question for you. What's next for you, Pavel? Where are you going next for disclosure and your podcast and things like that?
I'm trying to investigate this case about Jacobo because I think he is like essential to understanding a lot of what's happening. Um, Coming from the basis of like he is one of the few scientists who were actually trying to apply the scientific method to a lot of this stuff. Uh, in many cases, fully knowing that it was probably not going to work, but he was trying it, you know. Uh, his disappearance is so mysterious to me that, and it ties to so many people. There's pictures of him with Jacques Vallée, with John Keel, with Andrea Pujarich, and I want to know what's going on there. What happened back then, and what were those interactions like? And uh, in terms of the disclosure movement and all that stuff, I just hope because there's no way to control what they're gonna do at the end, especially the tech bros. You know, if they want to get their hands on this, they will. And I just hope that they have the sensibility to understand that we're like in a really precarious situation right now globally, and hopefully they have the best interest of the people at heart. That's all I can expect. And I think that's all anybody can expect from this. And if they get a hold of this information, I do want for them to um, tell us everything they can, you know. If they want to protect national security and all that, I get it. But if they want to monetize and capitalize on the truth, that's what I don't agree with. And I'll always be yelling at them, you know.
Yeah, dude, this is that's why I was mentioning, you know, my hesitation with like the set dates. But you did mention being optimistic, and that is, I think, something that not just myself, but people have to remind themselves in, and people that are in the UFO community, you see a lot of infighting, and people forget to just forgive, dude. Like, just be optimistic. You know, maybe maybe nothing good will come out of this, right? These next 3 things on the docket, but I mean, why not be positive about it, right? What do you got to lose, I guess, right? I mean, other than government stealing more millions of dollars and whatnot, but it's
Or
fine.
at least something very basic, or as basic as just treat each other with respect.
Yeah, agreed.
If you wanna debate, that's fine, dude. You're within your right. And if you think that just by asking you to not use vitriol or not use insults is preventing you from exercising your freedom of speech, Yeah, they like this phrase so much, freedom of speech in the US. Yeah, you have freedom of speech to say anything you want. Yeah. But the other person also has the freedom of speech to tell you to fuck off. Sorry. But
It's
but
true.
it's pretty basic stuff, and uh, it's not really that difficult, and it's very needed in places like UFO Twitter, because people just vomit whatever they want. And I guess they had a long day. I guess they needed a hug or something, but they just like unload on others just for the sake of it. And that's why I try to stay away from the majority of that. I do occasionally hop in to see if there's something proactive going on that is actually moving the conversation forward. I do find the occasional gem, but more often than not, it's really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to kind of hop out of there. You know what I mean when you feel that. But I agree with what Miss McGillicuddy was saying there, as well as you, Pavel. You got to give each other a little bit of grace. The world is already it's already gone past the point of you know that the last thing we need is like the what I consider to be one of the, if not the most important topic in human history. We have to be able to kind of transcend that just a little bit in order for the conversation to actually move forward. Is key to getting to the truth. Coming at this topic in a like unified sense would make this like the public, I think, would become unstoppable as far as getting to the truth is concerned.
We would solve this shit tomorrow, dude, if that happens.
Yeah.
Yep,
I shit you
exactly.
not.
Yeah,
So I
dude,
guess
no kidding.
I've got like one last question for you, Pavel, because I know we've reached the top of the hour here. Um, and and I've asked this to a few other people that we've interviewed, but you specifically, I want to ask: a year from now, where do you see disclosure from where we're at in this moment today?
We're gonna get well, not even a year from now. I don't know when Jesse's gonna release that interview with Harold Malmgren, but that's gonna be a before and after all of this, because of his position, um, and his like role in the Cold War, and his interactions with JFK and all that. And what he's gonna say there is gonna completely change the whole aspect of this. And there's gonna be a lot of debunking of that. Just beware, be mindful of that. But if you want to like corroborate whatever is said there, there's a bunch of data, a bunch of literature that you can go through. It's a lot, but yeah, it's pretty incredible. And the fact that he did that interview, and then like right after it happened, he had to go to the hospital. That's basically like a deathbed confession, if you ask
Crazy.
me. And whatever he said there, I think is gonna, yeah, it's gonna change the whole conversation for the entire year, at least.
Wow. That's a bold prediction, but I'm here for it. I support it. If it helps move the needle. I honestly thought I was kind of excited for him to be a little more open, but yeah, he was kind of up there in age, so
Yeah.
condolences. But yeah, I did want to say this, Pavel, I hope you get someone like a Graham Hancock on sometime. I'd love to see you kind of get into that type of conversation, maybe incorporate some of the UFO topic with some of the
Yeah.
ancient archaeology stuff, so that'd be really cool.
I'm not very well versed on it, but I am willing to learn. So yeah, I've already done a few phone calls there, here and there. I do want to get at least one of the Snake Bros on the show, besides Graham Hancock, and just talk to them about this,
Perfect.
and so they can educate all of us.
Yeah, Ben from is it Uncharted X or
Yeah,
X Uncharted?
that's another one.
He'd be another cool one for you to get
Yeah.
into with. That'd be cool. I know you did you have Matt Beal on?
Yes, I
as
did.
well, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of into that stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah, we talk a lot. We become good friends. He's like really a breath of fresh air in the whole podcast world because he does his own thing. He doesn't get like involved in all the chats and all that stuff. And what he's doing is like very diverse. He talks about everything. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I agree. Well, with that being said, Pavel, I know we got to get you going here pretty soon, but I do want to just thank you again for dropping to the portal room, man. I really, really appreciate it. This was super fun, and we got to do it again sometime soon.
Hell
Whenever
yeah.
you're available.
Yeah,
Hell
brother,
yeah.
it was awesome. Thank
And
you.
shout out to
All
the
right.
chat, man. There's a lot of people just in the chat. Thank you for joining us. This was really cool.
Oh yeah, shout out chat. Thanks again for popping in for Pavel. It was really, really cool to see everybody come in. I saw Red Panda got his channel back. Shout out. Good resource for UFO information and documentary. So
Some of the
shout
best
out.
documentaries on the UFO topic out there, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe we'll get Red in here one of these days. But yeah, Pavel, again, man, I just want to thank you so much for coming through. Much love, and we'll do it again sometime soon. So yeah, everybody.
Thank
Let's
you for
have a
having
good
me.
night.
Thank you, Christian. Have a good one, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pavel.
Thank you, Paul.
Peace, everybody.